having a lot of fun with some of these stories, but I'm curious, like what they say about higher ed, not just at the time that they occurred, but as far as this show is concerned, like what it means about the future of higher ed. And you just sort of hit on it, Jack, which is that athletics is part of the zeitgeist right now in a lot of ways around sort of outrage in different ways around higher ed. And it figures prominently in three of the stories that you picked out of that you all picked out of the 16. You had Jetgate with the Auburn president and board members looking to replace Tommy Tuberville. You had the UNC athletics, right? And the falsifying, not just grades, but also classes in some cases. And then even Varsity Blues has an athletic angle to it in terms of people fabricating, putting their faces on top of bodies that were not theirs, and showing that they played sports that they had never touched a lacrosse stick or whatever it was. So what do you make of that athletics is really a big undercurrent of these scandals in higher ed?
I think you're onto something there too. The relationship that colleges have to their athletics departments probably has something to do with this. This is a little outside of my expertise, but it is the front porch of the university, but it's also kind of running its own affairs. I think we've seen this with like really, wealthy med schools, for example, that kind of are their own fiefdoms, and they're not necessarily operating by the systems and values of the institution. I think that's one of them. The other thing is that I think a great higher ed controversy, and I'm saying great in the context of memorable, absurd, delicious.
Right. Not one that you are endorsing.
Yeah, something that I'm drawn to as a reporter. It usually bridges the interest and passions of the university community and the public at large. And there's no better way to do that than with athletics. So a great controversy usually confirms some sort of societal suspicion. All three of the cases that you mentioned do that. They do involve athletics, but they also confirm preconceived notions about the institution. So everybody thinks the game is rigged for rich people. And Varsity Blues says, you know what? You're absolutely right. It is. So you have federal prosecutors charging at least 50 people for using bribery and fraud and all these deplorable tactics to get students into highly selective colleges like Yale. And then, same thing with,
that was a good drop. That was a good drop.
Okay, that was a good drop of Yale there. We appreciate
that. Fair enough. But then you think about the UNC fake classes scandal. So if listeners don't remember this, UNC Chapel Hill had a years-long scandal over courses that students were enrolling in, a lot of athletes, that required very little work and that everyone seemed to leave with high grades. Well, this confirms another suspicion. Everyone thinks that the idea of the student athlete is kind of bogus in the, Power Five conferences at this point, at least as it relates to football and basketball. These people are not thought to be at the university to study Plato. They're thought to be there to play sports. And so a place like Chapel Hill that had held itself out there to a high standard and says you can have academic excellence and athletics excellence. This is sort of an unmasking of that idea. My colleague Andy Thomason wrote a whole book called Discredited about this, that is about that amateur ideal coming under scrutiny there. And then just briefly, the Jetgate scandal at Auburn, this was again a case in which some trustees were involved in flying to Louisville and trying to hire Bobby Petrino, who was the football coach there, while Tuberville was still not a United States senator, but was still almost as important, was still the coach of Auburn University's
maybe more
football
important
program.
Yeah, maybe more important.
And again, this was I lived in Auburn at the time, and this was a period of time in which people were, particularly on the faculty, were just super concerned about these good old boy trustees who were just consumed by football. It's all they seem to care about. And then you have this perfect sort of scandal, which is all these good old boy trustees getting on an airplane and trying to hire a new football coach. I mean, what could possibly confirm the suspicions and anxieties of people more than this? So a great controversy proves the skeptics right. It says, you know what? The stereotypes we've been denying forever, they're actually true. So I think that athletics is a way this can happen because it can take a sometimes boring governance story and make it more relatable because it's going through the lens of athletics and everybody's got a stake in that, usually particularly in a college town.
Yeah, and I think it's also about, follow the money, right? And the money is in athletics, and there's more likely to be scandal there as